There is a moment that happens after someone leaves your life when you catch yourself in the middle of doing something completely ordinary. You are washing a dish. You are unlocking your front door. You are staring at your phone, waiting for a message that will never come. And in that moment, something inside you cracks open, and you realize that you are still thinking about them. Not because you want to, not because you have decided to, but because part of you is still standing in the doorway, watching them walk away, wondering if they will turn around. They did not turn around, and now here you are, weeks or months or even years later, still carrying the echo of someone who chose to leave, still replaying conversations, still wondering what was so wrong with you that they could walk away without looking back, still measuring yourself against the absence they left behind. But something has been shifting. You have felt it. Not in any obvious way, not in any moment you could point to and say, here, this is where I changed. But something in you has been quietly transforming. The way you hold yourself, the way you speak, the way you no longer shrink in rooms where you used to disappear. The weight you carried is still there, but it sits differently now. You have been growing, perhaps without even realizing it. And the strange truth is this. The person who left you is beginning to realize what they lost. This is not wishful thinking. This is not revenge fantasy. This is something far more real and far more unsettling for everyone involved. What I want to share with you today comes from the work of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his entire life mapping the hidden territories of the human psyche. Jung understood something that most people never grasp, that our relationships are not what they appear to be on the surface, that when someone leaves us, they are not just walking away from who we are now, but from a version of themselves that they have projected onto us. And when we do the deep work of becoming whole, something happens in the unconscious realm that sends ripples across every connection we have ever made. The person who left you is not simply remembering you. They are encountering something they buried inside themselves, and they are recognizing it wearing your face. I have studied Jung's work for years, and there is a pattern I have seen repeating itself so many times that I can no longer call it coincidence. When someone does the inner work of integrating their shadow, of reclaiming the parts of themselves they abandoned or rejected, the people who left them begin to feel it. Not consciously at first. It starts as a subtle discomfort, a strange dream, an unexpected memory surfacing at 3 p.m. for no reason at all, and slowly it builds into something they cannot ignore. The dawning awareness that the person they walked away from has become something more than what they left behind. You have been becoming that something. And whether you realize it or not, the echoes of your transformation are reaching places and people you thought you had lost forever. Let me tell you about the invisible architecture of leaving. Because what happened to you, what happened when they walked out, was not just an ending. It was an earthquake that sent cracks running through foundations you did not even know existed. When someone chooses to leave a relationship, something fascinating happens in the psychological realm. Jung would describe it through what he called projection. We do not fall in love with people as they truly are. We fall in love with the parts of ourselves we have unconsciously placed inside them. Our unloved lives, our dormant qualities, the aspects of our own souls we could not yet claim, so we saw them in another person and called it love. The woman who seemed so alive, so spontaneous, so free, she may have been carrying the projected aliveness of a man who had become too rigid, too careful, too scared to take up space. The man who seemed so stable, so grounded, so sure of himself, he may have been carrying the projected groundedness of a woman who felt too chaotic inside her own skin to trust herself. We do not choose partners randomly. We choose them because they hold something that belongs to us, something we are not yet ready to integrate. And when they leave, they take that projection with them. They walk out the door holding a piece of your own psyche that you deposited in them without knowing it. This is why breakups feel like amputations. It is not just the person you are missing. It is yourself. The version of yourself you could only access when they were near. The possibility you felt when you looked in their eyes and saw your own potential reflected back. But here's what most people never understand and what changes everything once you do. The projection does not actually go anywhere. It was never really inside them. It was inside you all along. You simply could not see it because you had externalized it into another human being. Their leaving forces you into a confrontation you were never supposed to avoid forever. It forces you to reclaim what is yours. I once spoke with a man who had been left by his wife of 12 years. She left on a Tuesday afternoon. He remembered the exact time because he had looked at the clock when she said she was not in love with him anymore, and the numbers had burned into his memory. 2:17 in the afternoon. The rest of his life began at 2:17 on a Tuesday. For the first year, he fell apart completely. He stopped taking care of himself. He stopped calling his friends. He would sit in his car in the parking lot of his job and just stare at the steering wheel, unable to go in. He told me that he felt like someone had reached inside his chest and removed an organ he did not know he needed to survive. But then something shifted. Not all at once. It started when he began writing. Not for anyone else, just for himself. At first, it was just rage on paper. Just grief spilling out in messy, unformed sentences. But over time, the writing changed. He started to notice patterns he had never seen before. The way he had given away his own opinions in the marriage. The way he had stopped pursuing his own interests because he was so focused on keeping her happy. The way he had shrunk himself year after year until he could not even remember what he wanted or who he was outside of being her husband. Jung called this the dissolution of the persona, the crumbling of the mask we wear to navigate the world. It is painful beyond description, because for most of us, we have confused the mask with our actual face. When the persona breaks, we feel like we are dying. And in a sense, we are. The false self is dying. The version of us that was built for someone else's comfort is finally collapsing. This man did not know it at the time, but he was beginning the process Jung called individuation. The journey toward becoming whole. The slow and terrifying work of retrieving all the parts of yourself you scattered into other people, into jobs, into identities that were never really yours. 3 years after his wife left, he ran into her at a coffee shop. He had not seen her since the divorce was finalized, and something in her face stopped him cold. She looked at him like she was seeing a stranger, not with hostility, with confusion, with something that looked almost like grief. She said to him, "You seem different." And he realized in that moment that she was not commenting on his appearance. Something in his energy had changed so fundamentally that she could feel it from across the room. She was recognizing that the man she left was no longer the man standing in front of her. And more than that, she was recognizing that some part of her had been counting on him to stay broken. Some part of her needed to believe that leaving him was the right choice, and that belief was built on the foundation of his diminishment. His growth threatened the entire narrative she had constructed about why she left. This is what happens when you do the inner work. The people who left you, the people who walked away, convinced that you were not enough, they feel it. Not because you tell them. Not because you post about it online. But because the unconscious does not operate within the boundaries of physical proximity. Jung understood this deeply. He believed that the psyche is not confined to the individual, that we are all connected through the collective unconscious, and that the shifts we make in our own inner world create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. You have been creating ripples. and the person who left you has been feeling the waves. There is a line from Jung that I return to again and again. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." What most people miss about this quote is what it implies about endings. Because if the meeting transforms both people, then the parting must also transform both people. You cannot share that kind of alchemical reaction with another soul and walk away unchanged. Leaving does not undo the chemistry. It simply forces the reaction to continue underground. The person who left you has been undergoing their own transformation whether they know it or not. But here's the difference. They chose to run from it. They chose to interrupt the process before it could complete. They walked away believing that distance would give them freedom from the intensity of what was happening between you. But the psyche does not work that way. You cannot leave parts of yourself in another person and expect to feel whole. You cannot project your unlived life onto someone and then abandon them without feeling the loss of your own potential. This is why they are starting to realize what they lost. It's not you exactly. It is the possibility of who they could have become if they had stayed long enough to do the work. It is the mirror you held up that showed them both their beauty and their shadow. It is the invitation to grow that they declined, and the growth that happened anyway in your absence from their life, a growth they can somehow sense, is no longer available to them in the same way. You have been moving forward. They have been circling. I want you to sit with something for a moment. There is a reason you are watching this right now. There is a reason these words are landing in a specific way in a specific place inside your chest. You have been carrying a question you may never have put into words, and it sounds something like this. Was I not enough? Did they leave because something was wrong with me? Will I ever matter to someone the way I wanted to matter to them? Let me tell you something that took me years to understand. When I first encountered Jung's concept of the shadow, I thought it was about darkness. I thought the shadow was where we hide our worst impulses, our ugliest thoughts, our most shameful desires, and that is part of it. But the shadow contains something else that most people never talk about. The shadow also contains gold. Jung called this the positive shadow. It is all the parts of yourself that you rejected not because they were bad, but because they were too bright. The creativity you suppressed because someone once told you it was impractical. The confidence you buried because you were taught that taking up space was arrogant. The power you disowned because you were made to feel that strong people are dangerous. These qualities do not disappear. They sink into the shadow, and they wait. When someone leaves you, particularly someone you loved deeply, you are forced to confront your shadow in ways you would have otherwise avoided for years. This is the gift hidden inside the grief. The relationship was serving as a container for certain aspects of yourself, and when the container breaks, everything spills out. Now you have no choice but to look at it. Now you have no choice but to pick up the pieces and decide which ones actually belong to you. The version of you that existed inside that relationship was not the full version of you. It was a negotiated version, a compromised version, a version that had been shaped and trimmed to fit inside the available space. And some of that shaping was healthy, the natural adjustments we all make to live alongside another person. But some of it was not. Some of it was the slow surrender of your own essential nature in exchange for belonging. When they left, they gave you back the space you did not know you had lost. And what you have been doing since then, whether you recognize it or not, is expanding into that space, filling it with yourself, becoming reacquainted with the person you were before you learned to shrink. This expansion is not invisible. The person who left can feel it even from a distance. because you are no longer energetically where they left you. You have moved. You have grown. And the psychic coordinates they had for you no longer match the person you have become. Maybe for you, this looks like finally saying no to things that drain you. Maybe it looks like setting boundaries with family members who have treated your time and energy like an unlimited resource. Maybe it looks like leaving a job that was killing your spirit, or starting the creative project you have been postponing for a decade, or simply allowing yourself to take up space in a room without apologizing for existing. Maybe it looks like nothing visible at all. Maybe the transformation has been entirely interior, a quiet revolution in the way you relate to yourself. A gentleness that was not there before. A willingness to witness your own pain without abandoning yourself the way others have abandoned you. A growing refusal to betray yourself in exchange for approval. If you are recognizing yourself in this, I want you to leave one word in the comments. Reclaimed. Not for me, for yourself. As a marker that today, you saw something you have been avoiding. That today, you named the transformation that has been happening inside you even when no one else could see it. There is a story from Greek mythology that I have been thinking about a lot lately. It is the story of Psyche and Eros. Psyche was a mortal woman so beautiful that people began worshiping her instead of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. In her jealousy, Aphrodite sent her son Eros to make Psyche fall in love with something monstrous. But when Eros saw Psyche, he fell in love with her himself. Eros took Psyche to a magical palace where they lived together, but there was one condition: she could never see his face. Every night he came to her in the darkness, and every night she knew him only by touch and voice and presence. For a while this was enough. But Psyche's sisters planted seeds of doubt. They convinced her that she must be living with a monster, and that she needed to see the truth. One night Psyche lit a lamp while Eros slept, and in the golden light she saw not a monster but the most beautiful being she had ever encountered. A drop of hot oil fell from the lamp onto his shoulder, and he woke. When he saw that she had broken their agreement, he flew away. He left her. Psyche spent years searching for Eros. She completed impossible tasks set by Aphrodite. She descended into the underworld itself. She faced death and came back changed. And in the end, she was transformed into a goddess reunited with Eros, not as the naive girl who had lit the lamp, but as a fully realized being who had earned her own divinity through trial and suffering. This story lives inside everyone who has been left by someone they loved. You lit the lamp. You tried to see clearly what was hidden in the dark, and they flew away. But here is what the myth teaches us. The leaving was not the end of the story. The leaving was the beginning of Psyche's transformation. Everything she became because he left. Everything she earned in his absence. And when they reunited, they met as equals. You are in the middle of your own myth right now. You are somewhere in the long journey between the moment they flew away and the moment of reunion that may or may not come. But the reunion, if it happens, will not be with the person who left. It will be with yourself. The fully realized version of you that is being forged in the fire of this absence. Jung wrote something that has stayed with me since the first time I read it. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Think about that word, privilege. Not the goal of a lifetime, not the task of a lifetime. The privilege. As if becoming yourself is a gift that not everyone receives. As if wholeness is something that must be earned through a willingness to be broken. You are earning it now. Every day that you get up and face your life without the person you thought you needed. Every moment that you choose yourself instead of betraying yourself for the ghost of a relationship that could not hold you. Every breath you take in the ruins of what was. As you slowly begin to build what will be, the person who left you is now realizing what they lost because the unconscious does not lie and does not forget. They left behind someone who was in the process of becoming extraordinary. And no matter how much distance they put between you, they can feel that the person they tried to leave behind is no longer there. You have moved. You have transformed. And the place where they thought they left you is empty now because you are no longer small enough to fit inside their limited perception of you. Let me share with you the path forward, not as a set of steps or a formula, but as a way of being that will continue the transformation already underway. The first shift happens when you stop trying to understand why they left and start becoming curious about who you are without them. This sounds simple, but it is radical. Most people spend months or years running elaborate analyses in their minds. They replay every conversation, looking for the clue they missed. They construct theories about what went wrong. They torture themselves with if-only statements that become prisons. But Jung would tell you that this kind of thinking keeps you trapped in the past. The psyche wants to move forward. The soul wants to grow. And growth cannot happen when you are constantly looking backward, trying to make sense of something that may never make sense. The shift is not about getting answers. It is about asking different questions. Instead of why did they leave, you begin to ask who am I when I am not performing for someone else. Instead of what was wrong with me, you begin to ask what parts of myself did I abandon in that relationship that I now get to reclaim. Instead of will they ever come back, you begin to ask where am I going and do I even want them to follow? This is not about pretending the pain does not exist. The pain is real and it deserves to be honored. But the pain is not the whole story. The pain is the doorway, not the destination. The second shift happens when you learn to become your own witness. One of the most devastating aspects of being left is the loss of someone who saw you. In a relationship, we are constantly being reflected back to ourselves through another person's eyes. They laugh at our jokes and we feel funny. They find us attractive and we feel desirable. They believe in our dreams and we feel capable. When they leave, that mirror shatters. And suddenly, we are left trying to see ourselves without any reflection at all. This is disorienting in a way that is difficult to describe to anyone who has not experienced it. But here's what I have learned. The reflection they provided was never the real you anyway. It was you filtered through their perceptions, their projections, their needs and fears and limitations. The person they saw when they looked at you was shaped as much by their own psychology as by your actual being. What you are developing now is the capacity to witness yourself, to look inward and see yourself clearly, not through anyone else's eyes, but through your own. This is the birthplace of genuine self-worth. Not the self-worth that depends on being wanted, but the self-worth that exists because you exist. Because you are a unique expression of the universe experiencing itself. Because no one else in all of human history has been precisely you, and no one else ever will be. Jung called this relationship with the self, capital S. The self is not the ego, not the collection of preferences and identities we have gathered over a lifetime. The self is the deeper center, the still point around which the whole personality revolves. When you learn to witness yourself from this place, you become less dependent on external validation. You become less devastated when someone fails to see your worth because you know your worth is not dependent on being seen. The third shift happens when you begin to integrate your shadow with compassion instead of judgment. I mentioned earlier that the shadow contains both darkness and gold. The work of shadow integration is the work of bringing both into the light of consciousness. For most people, this process begins with confronting the darker aspects. The jealousy, the rage, the pettiness, the desires we are ashamed of. the thoughts we would never speak aloud. These parts of ourselves get pushed into the shadow because they conflict with the image we want to present to the world. But they do not disappear. They just become unconscious. And unconscious material always finds ways to leak out, often at the worst possible moments, often in the most destructive forms. When someone leaves us, the shadow often becomes hyperactive. We might find ourselves consumed with vindictive fantasies. We might stalk their social media with an intensity that frightens us. We might say cruel things about them to anyone who will listen, trying to poison others against them as a way of managing our own wounded feeling. The path forward is not to suppress these shadow elements, but to meet them with compassion. To recognize that the part of you that wants revenge is a hurt child trying to protect itself. That the part of you that obsesses over their new life is a frightened animal trying to maintain some connection to what was lost. That the part of you that wants to destroy their reputation is a wounded warrior who does not know how else to fight for your own value. When you can meet these parts with understanding instead of shame, something remarkable happens. They begin to soften. They begin to integrate. The energy that was being consumed by internal warfare becomes available for creation, for growth, for life. And then there is the golden shadow, the gifts and capacities you have not yet claimed. Part of why losing someone feels so devastating is that they often carried projected aspects of your own unlived potential. The work now is to retrieve that potential, to become for yourself what you were looking for in them. Were they the adventurous one? What would it mean for you to cultivate adventure in your own life? Were they the confident one? What would it mean for you to find confidence in yourself, not as a performance, but as a true expression of your nature? Were they the stable one, the creative one, the passionate one? Whatever you saw in them that you loved, consider the possibility that you were seeing your own unclaimed gold reflected back at you. If this is landing for you, share this video with someone who is going through their own version of this. Not because I need the views, because they need the words. Because somewhere right now there is a person sitting alone in their apartment, wondering if they will ever feel whole again, and maybe this message is supposed to reach them through you. There is a psychological concept that Jung explored called enantiodromia. It is the tendency for things to turn into their opposite. Extreme positions, whether in individuals or in situations, tend to reverse themselves when they reach their peak. The most arrogant person is often secretly filled with self-doubt. The most controlling person is often terrified of chaos. The person who ran from intimacy is often aching for connection they cannot allow themselves to receive. The person who left you is experiencing their own enantiodromia. The freedom they thought they were running toward has revealed itself to contain its own form of imprisonment. The lightness they felt when they walked away has turned heavy as the weight of what they abandoned settles into their awareness. The certainty they had that leaving was the right choice has begun to splinter into doubt. This is not speculation. This is how the psyche works. Whatever we run from, we run toward. Whatever we deny, we encounter again in a different form. The person who left you is now facing the parts of themselves they tried to escape by leaving. And you are the symbol around which this confrontation constellates. Jung would say that you have become an archetypal figure in their unconscious. Not you as a literal person, but you as a symbol of something they were not ready to integrate. The more you grow, the more powerful that symbol becomes. The more you heal, the more they feel the echo of what could have been. But here's what matters most. None of this is about them. I know I have been talking about their realization, their loss, their confrontation with what they left behind. But I have been talking about it because I want you to understand what is happening in the larger field. I want you to know that your transformation is not invisible and that the universe registers every moment of your growth. But the point of knowing this is not to wait for them to come back. The point is not to hold your breath, hoping they will realize their mistake and return. The point is to let this knowledge release you from the lie that your worth depends on their recognition. You are not growing so that they will finally see what they lost. You are growing because growth is the nature of life. You are healing because healing is what the soul does when it is given enough space and enough compassion. You are becoming who you truly are because this is the privilege of a lifetime, and you have finally stopped postponing it. If they ever do come back, they will meet a different person. Not the person they left. Not the person who would have taken them back without question, so grateful to be chosen again. They will meet someone who has learned to choose themselves, someone who has integrated their own shadow and retrieved their own gold, someone who no longer needs to be completed by another because they have done the work of becoming whole. And the truth is, you may not want them anymore, not because of resentment or revenge, but because you will have outgrown the version of yourself that needed them in the way you once did. You will see them clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as a savior, not as a missing piece, but as another flawed and beautiful human being on their own journey, capable of both wounding and wonder. There is something I want you to imagine. Imagine a morning about a year from now. You wake up slowly, not with dread, not with the heavy feeling of having to face another day. Just naturally, peacefully, as if your body knows it is safe to wake. You make coffee or tea, whatever you drink in the mornings. You sit somewhere quiet, maybe by a window, maybe outside if the weather is kind, and you realize that you have not thought about them in days. Not because you are suppressing it, not because you have trained yourself to avoid the memories, but because your mind has simply moved on. There are other things to think about now, other interests, other people, other versions of yourself to explore. You still carry the wisdom of what you went through. You have not forgotten. But the wound has healed into a scar, and scars are just stories written on the body. They remind you of what happened without making you relive it. In this imagined morning, you feel something you have not felt in a long time. It's hard to name at first. It is not happiness exactly. It is quieter than that, more sustainable. It is a sense of being okay with being exactly where you are, a sense of being at home inside your own skin, a sense that you are finally in the right place, not because the external circumstances are perfect, but because you have found yourself and you are no longer willing to abandon yourself for anyone. This is where you are headed. This is what the transformation is building toward. Not a reunion with the person who left, though that may happen in some form, but a reunion with yourself. The self you were before you learned to shrink. The self you will be after you have learned to expand again. Jung wrote something toward the end of his life that has become a kind of North Star for me. He said, "Your vision will become clearer only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. You have been looking inside. That is why you are here. That is why these words are landing. You are in the process of waking up. Not to a perfect life, not to a life without pain, but to a life that is truly yours. A life where you are the author, not the character. A life where your worth is not determined by who stays or leaves, but by the relationship you have with your own soul. The person who left you is now realizing what they lost. But more importantly, you are realizing what you found. You found yourself waiting in the rubble. You found that you were always more than you were allowed to be. You found that the love you were giving away so freely was always available to give to yourself. And here is the strange and beautiful truth. The person who left you, whoever they are, played their part in this story perfectly. Not because they meant to. not because they were wise or good, but because their leaving was the catalyst for something that needed to happen. Their absence was the soil in which you were finally planted. Their rejection was the refusal that forced you to stop looking outside and start looking within. You may never thank them. You do not have to. But somewhere in the quiet of your own heart, you might acknowledge that the worst thing that happened to you became the door to becoming yourself. I want to circle back to where we began. That moment when you were doing something ordinary, washing a dish, unlocking a door, waiting for a message that will not come. That moment used to be filled with longing and grief. That moment used to be a reminder of what you lost. But now, as you have been listening to these words, something has shifted. That moment is starting to look different. You're still there in the kitchen at the door, holding your phone. But you are not the same person who used to stand there aching. You are someone who has begun to reclaim themselves. You are someone who has started to integrate what was broken and retrieve what was buried. You are someone who is learning that the love they were looking for was never in another person. It was in the relationship they are building with their own depths.